And now let's move on to something a little bit lighter because this is related to dogs sniffing for the coronavirus. And dogs can be trained to detect more than 90% of COVID-19 infections, even when patients are asymptomatic. And this is according to research published on Monday, which authors actually hope that it could help replace the need to quarantine new arrivals. Researchers from the London School of Tropical Medicine want to see if dogs could detect a distinctive odor given off from chemical compounds associated with someone who is COVID positive but doesn't show any symptoms. They gathered samples of clothing and face masks from people who had tested positive for mild or symptomatic coronavirus. Samples of the socks of 200 COVID-19 cases were collected and arranged in lab tests for 6 dogs that had been trained to indicate either a presence or absence of the chemical compound. The dogs needed to be trained not to identify false positives in a bid to hack their reward system and obtain treats even if there were no COVID-19 samples in a given test. This means that the dog fully understands and gets a reward for a correct negative as well as a correct positive. And this is according to Ms. Claire Guest from the school's Faculty of Infectious and Tropical Diseases. Overall, the dogs were successfully able to identify between 94 and 82% of coronavirus samples. The researchers then modeled how effectively these success rates combined with traditional PCR tests could help detect mild or asymptomatic COVID-19 cases. They found that using dogs to screen arrivals at terminuses such as airports could detect 91% of cases, resulting in a 2.24 times lower rate of transmission than with PCR tests alone. Though this research has yet to be peer-reviewed, the scientists hoped it would eventually replace the need for travelers to quarantine, which necessarily disrupts every arrival, even though the vast majority are not COVID positive. They said the key thing is that dogs are significantly quicker than other tests. So the scientists suggest using dogs as the first initial screening, and then those arrivals that were indicated as positive would then receive a complementary PCR test. However, experts say there is a lot more validation that needs to be done before we could be confident that the dogs can reliably and specifically detect asymptomatic coronavirus infections in people in airports and train stations. But if we go back to Thailand, back in mid-March, we reported the news about sniffer dogs in Thailand that were specially trained to detect people infected with COVID-19 who do not exhibit any symptoms. They are expected to be sent to international airports and seaports to help identify asymptomatic cases among arrivals from abroad. This report came from the Jula Journal website, saying that the 6 Labrador Retriever dogs trained by the research team at the veterinary faculty of Chulalongkorn University have a 94.8% accuracy in detection. They said this is because dogs' noses are 50 times more sensitive than humans and can detect asymptomatic cases through their sweat. So that's pretty interesting here, the use of dogs to detect those who do not show any symptoms of being affected with COVID-19.